Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode. We really appreciate you joining us. This podcast really shows us how we can all learn, live, and thrive off of each other. By sharing our knowledge through our conversations, we will impart some knowledge whilst learning ourselves how to progress even further.
Have you on the show once again. This is Omobola Stephen, your host on the Backstory with Omobola Stephen. Now, on the Backstory, we always like to talk about the things that have not worked and what will make it work. Now, with expert and professionals who are added to the topics of government and politics going forward. Today, I have Nagle, who is a white anti-racist author, a facilitator, and an activist. Welcome to the show with me, Nagle.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Good to have you on the show. Now, I'm looking forward for us to focus on the pertinent issues centering with white supremacy, migration, etc. in the heart of America. I know that this is a big topic for discussion, and I'm looking forward to an impactful and exciting time with you on the show. Now, the question is that, do you think that the gains that the immigrants bring to the U.S. could be that the reason why the language of its proponents has become so extreme?
It's interesting to me if we look at history, the Holocaust and the genocide of indigenous people and the many First Nations who were here is still happening. But we don't frame it that way. We don't talk about, my European ancestors, for example, as being immigrants or other people of European descent. There was a mythology that people of European descent carried with them when they came to this country. That was called manifest destiny. This idea that basically, we were entitled to occupy this land, and they saw themselves as superior to. Like we don't call them invaders. We call them pioneers or settlers. I mean, this is a euphemism. What happened was that we brought disease. We murdered nearly all of the buffalo that were the food and clothing source for the native peoples, and took over, basically. And we're continuing to do that. So we haven't really reckoned with this. We haven't reckoned with the fact that we've nearly wiped out hundreds of indigenous nations in the US. And so when we talk about immigrants and closing our doors, to me it seems very strange, and it points to the fact that we have not reckoned with with our own history of occupying this country.
Oh, right. Now, on a structural level, racism serves to perpetuate inequalities in access to power, resources, and opportunities across racial and ethnic groups. Gio, how can we dismantle the white supremacy?
Wow. Well, see, I think it can happen at so many different levels. White supremacy mythology is a set of, it gets reproduced through policies, through actions, through practices, through beliefs, through customs, through images, through language. It's everywhere. It's, we can't just suck it out. If you sucked the white supremacy mythology out of the United States of America, we would not recognize the United States of America anymore. So what I'm interested in is looking at how it impacts myself as a white Jewish person, which is interesting in and of itself, because as a white person, I walk around getting privilege. I don't get followed in stores. I don't get pulled over because people see a white woman and they think, oh, she's probably fine. That's white privilege. And yet I'm afraid to go to synagogue tonight because Nazi groups have declared February 25th, which is tomorrow, a day of hate. I just moved to this town and I'm afraid to go to synagogue. My husband and I are both afraid because of violence. The last time we were in, the synagogue was vandalized. So that's an interesting place to be. I think for white people who want to or interested in dismantling white supremacy mythology, we need to start from the inside. We need to befriend our own responses, our own patterns, our own thoughts that crop up when we start to talk about this stuff. Usually when I talk about white supremacy mythology, there's a white person, at least one, who gets very defensive, ruffled, upset, and they'll say things like, well, you obviously hate white people. Or, I'm not a racist. I'm a good person. I don't see color. There's a whole range of predictable responses that happen. It's usually comes from a place of being activated or triggered. And to me, that mindset itself is a product of white supremacy mythology, because white supremacy mythology says we don't talk about whiteness. It just is. It's normal. And a lot of times if you ask a white person, how do you feel about white? And I'm like, well, I don't really think of myself as being white. I mean, I'm just, normal. And there you have it, right? Because if white is normal, then what about someone with your skin color? Saying you're abnormal? But it's not taught to us that way. We're not taught that we were born into the system of white supremacy mythology, and that it warps and shapes and distorts and perverts all these human experiences.
Oh, so nation that don't identify as being white or like to be lumped with other white people. What will you say to this?
Can you say that again?
Now we have some extreme situations where we have some whites who don't like to be identified as white, or don't like to be lumped with white people. What's your take on this?
Well, so I think everybody gravitates toward people like them, whether it's by age, in some cases by gender or sexual orientation. There's a book called, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Lunchroom, which is something that white people sometimes ask. And one of the answers to that is, well, where are the white kids sitting? They're also sitting with other white people. So there's, on one level, there's a sort of very innocent, oh, you're part of my tribe, not to co-opt the indigenous term, but you're part of my affinity group, my family, my place where I belong. And then there's white people who actually think that other white people are superior to anybody else. And so they are involved with explicitly white supremacist groups. I think that's a product of historical trauma. Those white people aren't the ones who are getting all the wealth in the country. They are grappling with a broken promise of whiteness and holding on to the one thing that they've been told makes them superior. And then for people who don't want to be labeled as white, I think oftentimes they're in the stage of discomfort and denial about the racialized horror that's actually happening in this country. And they want to dissociate themselves from any culpability.
Oh, right. So Jill, so why can't Black and brown people, why can't they be racist also?
Well, if you're looking at in a context of white supremacy mythology, a lot of times I think what goes by the name of racism among people of African or Latinx or indigenous descent is actually them being really sick of white supremacy. And if you look at racism as a feeling about another group plus the power to enforce denial of basic services, or the power to keep somebody out of a space, or the power to be mean or harmful to them and not be held accountable. Black and brown people don't have that over white people. White people are not, systemically being denied loans or housing or the right to roam freely by Black people. That's not how it is in this country.
Oh, now, so I will look at that. So how can we introduce new dynamics and in visualization and racist discourses going forward?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Now, going by your earlier explanation, now how can we introduce the new dynamics in racialization and racist discourses to effect change where necessary?
What are some new dynamics to affect
Yes,
change? Is that
we
what you're
can bring
asking?
into the table. That's right.
Well, one thing that I would like to do is to invite white people to step into their own version of anti-racist leadership. Nobody's calling you a racist, to say, we're all in this together as white people. Let's take a look at what happened to us. What were we told? What lies were we told? What mythology did we take on? And how can each of us contribute to a more truth-based way of life? You know, most people have a value system that they live by, whether it comes from Christianity, Judaism, Islam, or secular humanism, like a kind of, I'm a good person, I'm an atheist, I have my own set of beliefs. But those beliefs, if you look at all the different religions across the world, and also all the non-religious people's value systems, at the core of it is a kind of a do no harm, treat people with kindness, leave the campsite better than you found it. I mean, we really have a common core of moral grounding in terms of treating one another with respect. And so given that, the effects of white supremacy mythology run counter to that. So the set of tools that I'd like to see us adopt is, how can each of us come into better alignment with what we personally value, the kind of world we personally might want to live in, whether it's thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not kill, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or just be a good person. Because the harmful and fatal effects of white supremacy mythology fly in the face of all human value systems, whether those values come from religion or humanitarian places, like a desire to be a good person, to create and maintain a world that our children would thrive in. So I would invite people listening, if you're white, to ask yourself, how can I help to rectify racialized wrongs in a way that will bring me myself into better alignment with my own most deeply held values?
Thank you once again, Nagle, for that insight on the show. So isn't it inappropriate to make children feel guilty for being white?
I would say yes, but there's a subtle but profound difference between, quote unquote, making a child feel guilty and helping them understand the truth, and then helping them process their feelings of grief and sadness and even rage. Because if, being able to metabolize hard truths, being able to look at, oh man, we did this thing, my grandfather did this thing, being able to look at that and inquire into it and be with our own feelings, that is a skill that serves us not just in learning about the more difficult parts of our history, but in navigating the world and being in relationship. If you find out your partner lied to you, you're probably not going to close your ears and go, la, 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 I can't hear. You're going to say, whoa, what happened? Let me deal with this. How do I deal with this? So I think it's absolutely necessary and appropriate to help children develop age-appropriate tools for facing hard truths. And again, we're not going to give bloody details of massacres to first graders, but some first graders lived through bloody massacres, and so I think we need to find ways, again, that are age appropriate to help children look at these hard truths and eventually learn how to stand up against injustice.
Jill, Skin in the Game. It's your new purpose book. Tell me about it.
So it's called Skin in the Game, How White People Benefit from Dismantling White Supremacy. And basically what I'm saying is that white supremacy mythology produces in white people a very visible and predictable range of mindsets. some of which are harmful to us as white people. And that rather than pointing fingers at one another and saying, well, those are the racists over there, I'm a good white person, end of story. Let's look at how the collective white psyche is dealing with this white elephant in the room, if you will. And I look at it kind of like a big dysfunctional family, that people who are like the Derek Chauvins and the Dylan Roofs of the world, who are killing Black people, are only the most visible manifestations of the worst of white supremacy mythology. And that if we can see our common humanity, we can start to reach across the divide and say, hey, what's going on here? How do we repair this harm that has caused the white psyche to explode in ways that are harmful and fatal to Black and brown people? We can shore up our sense of responsibility, our sense of involvement, our sense of connection, to take stewardship of this phenomenon that infiltrates the white psyche in the United States of America. It's too easy, I think, for people to read a book, join a club, put up a Black Lives Matter sign, and say, there, I'm a good white person. It's those other people that are, committing the murders who are bad. But I think if to move forward, we need to start to see our common humanity. We need to start to talk with the other white people, and not in blaming and accusatory ways, but in curious ways that will create transformative conversations that will help to disrupt the trance-like mindsets that white supremacy mythology produces in white people. And part of what I do in the book is I do what I've done in my workshops and live is I help white readers who care about ending racism, help equip them with tools to have these transformative conversations with other white people.
Absolutely. Thank you once again, Jill. Do you have any other exciting news information you'd like to share with the audience of the Backstory?
I come by this honestly. My aunt, Phyllis Nagle Washington, when she was 19 years old in 1946, she integrated the segregated bus. She saw that she was from New York and she wasn't familiar with segregation. So she went down to Florida. When she came back, she saw that a bunch of people were clustered in the back of the bus while the people up front were just kind of lounging and taking up space. And she caught the eye of an older woman and she motioned. She's like, come up to the front of the bus. And the woman shook her head no and pointed up to the ceiling. And so my Aunt Phyllis looked up at the ceiling and she saw a sign that said colored seat from the rear. And it was at that moment that she noticed everybody scrunched up in the back of the bus had dark skin, and everybody lounging 2 or 3 seats in the front of the bus had light skin. And then she just went ballistic and she one by one gathered, helped the white people consolidate their belongings, and she led the Black people one by one to occupy until the full bus was integrated. And then the bus driver tried to kick her off the bus, called her an N-word lover. And she went on to chair a Black Studies department, all the while saying if ever a Black person wants to come and take over, she would step aside, but nobody ever did. So I grew up intimidated by my Aunt Phyllis, but as I got older, I went, I see. She has really taken this on. She died in 1995, I think. And in Jewish tradition, we don't focus so much on heaven or an afterlife as carrying on the work of the deceased. So she is a great inspiration to me. I love you, Phyllis. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Jill Nagle, for that. Jill, any parting word you'd like to share with my audience? I'd also like you to provide your social media and just on your website.
Sure. You can find me at evolutionaryworkplace.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. I have 2 profiles there. One of them is my content strategy profile, but the other one is has a tagline, dismantling white supremacy from the inside out. And if you think this kind of work could benefit you as a leader or a group of leaders or your organization, I welcome contact Jill at evolutionaryworkplace.com.
Absolutely. Now, Jill Nagle is a white anti-racist author, a facilitator, and an activist. It's really a great time having you on the show. I wish you the best of luck in your book projects and in other subsequent projects you have going forward.
Thank you so much, Omobola. It's really great to meet you.
All right. Now, if you'd like to catch up with any of these episodes of the Backstory with Omobola Stephen, you can do so on any podcast distribution platforms or any cross-promotion platforms you bump into online. You have an amazing time. Perhaps you'd like to be a guest on my show, right? Sharing disruptive mindset conversation on any topics on the politics and government. I would like to have you as a guest on the show. You can send a mail to me at omobolastephen@outlook.com. Perhaps you'd like to get to know more about me and what I've been up to. You can check me at omobolastephen.com. Now, I need you to stay safe with all my love. Back to soon. Bye for now.